Before we begin this beautiful story, let us know where you're watching from. And if you enjoy heartwarming love stories, please like, comment, and subscribe. It means so much to us. Jackson Wilson stood in front of the grand windows of his office tower, watching the city lights flicker below. From this height, life looked small, distant, even peaceful. But inside, he felt nothing but pressure. His phone buzzed again. His brother's wedding was just a week away, and every member of the Wilson family was expecting him to show up with someone. Not just someone, a wife. Jackson had never cared about appearances. He was the type who wore black suits without ties and kept his answers short. But this time, the whispers had grown too loud. The board thought he was emotionally stunted. His family thought he was lonely. And the world? They just thought he was cold. He wasn't cold. He was just, careful. His assistant, Gregory, walked in carrying a tablet. "Here's the list, sir. All highly discreet. Models, actresses, influencers. Each one signed a non-disclosure agreement. Pick anyone." Jackson scrolled through the glossy faces. Perfect smiles. Glamorous bios. Every woman seemed like she had already rehearsed 1,000 fake kisses in front of the mirror. He dropped the tablet on the desk. "No." Gregory hesitated. "Sir, the wedding is in 5 days." "I don't care. I'm not bringing someone who feels like an empty script." Later that afternoon, Jackson wandered into a small bookstore tucked between a coffee shop and a florist. He didn't know why. Maybe he needed silence. Maybe he just wanted something real. The place smelled like pages and memories, and that's when he saw her. She was standing on a stepladder, reaching for a classic edition of Jane Eyre. Her fingers were careful, delicate. A smudge of ink marked her wrist. She wore a soft beige sweater, her auburn blonde hair tied in a loose braid. No makeup, no flashy smile, just pure presence. Her name tag read Olivia. Something inside Jackson stirred. He wasn't sure what it was, only that it wasn't the usual emptiness. She stepped down and caught him staring. "Can I help you find something?" she asked, her voice soft but clear. He didn't answer immediately. He was thinking too fast, or maybe too slow. Then out of nowhere he asked, "Are you married?" Her eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me, I need a wife," he said bluntly. "Just for 3 days." Her eyes widened. I don't understand." "I have to attend my brother's wedding," he continued. "My family expects me to bring a woman, not a date, a wife." She laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. "That's a unique pickup line." "I'm serious." She looked him up and down. "You don't look crazy, but you sound insane." "I'll pay you well," Jackson added. "You'll stay in a guest suite. You'll wear a ring. Smile when I smile. Touch my hand when people are looking. And pretend I'm in love with you?" she asked, still confused. "Yes." Her gaze sharpened. "Why me?" Jackson hesitated. That was the hard part. He couldn't say it was her freckles, or the way she seemed to fit in that store like a storybook character, or how, in just 30 seconds, she made the world feel less mechanical. "You're real," he finally said. "You're not trying to impress me." She crossed her arms. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." Olivia glanced toward the corner where a child sat on the floor flipping through a picture book. She seemed to care about this place, about people. She wasn't playing a part. She was living one. "And what if I say no?" she asked. "Then I walk out and forget this ever happened," Jackson replied. "But something tells me you're not just a bookstore girl." That hit a nerve. She hated being underestimated. All her life, people had looked at her and assumed she was simple, fragile, forgettable. Jackson's words stung, but not in a cruel way, in a way that made her want to prove him wrong. She took a deep breath. 3 days, that's it?" He nodded. "Just 3. And you'll pay for my time. Name your price." She stared at him for a long moment, then extended her hand. "Olivia Johnson." Jackson took it. "Jackson Wilson." Their handshake was brief, but something electric passed between them, and neither of them would admit it. But something had already begun. Not a transaction, not a lie, but a story, one that neither of them expected to write. The black car rolled up the stone-paved driveway like a shadow entering enemy territory. Olivia sat stiffly beside Jackson, her fingers clutching the handle of her small purse, knuckles pale. This wasn't just any house. This was the Wilson estate, a symbol of old money, icy reputations, and generations of pride that could crush someone like her in a single glance. It didn't help that the mansion looked like it belonged in a museum. Grand chandeliers gleamed from arched windows, and perfectly trimmed hedges lined a driveway longer than a city block. Marble lions guarded the front door like sentinels of status. "This place," Olivia whispered, eyes wide. Jackson looked at her. "You okay?" She nodded, but her voice betrayed her. "I feel like I'm walking into a fairy tale castle where the princess gets eaten." He almost smiled. "Don't worry, I'll make sure you get out alive." The butler opened the door before they could even knock. Inside, the temperature dropped, literally and emotionally. Every surface gleamed, polished to perfection. But the warmth of home, it was missing. Footsteps echoed as they walked in. Olivia could feel it. Dozens of eyes turning toward her. Some curious, some judgmental, most of them cold. She felt like a mismatched puzzle piece forced into a perfect frame. A woman in pearls and a tight smile approached them. Jackson's aunt, Lorraine. She looked Olivia up and down, lips thinning as if she'd just bitten into a lemon. "Jackson," she said with a nod, "you've brought someone." "Yes," he replied, draping an arm protectively around Olivia's waist. "This is my wife, Olivia." The lie was smooth, too smooth. Olivia tried to smile. Aunt Lorraine's smile didn't move. "Where did you find her?" Jackson narrowed his eyes. "A bookstore." "Ah," a pause. "That explains the simplicity." The jab landed like a slap. Olivia felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but Jackson's grip on her tightened slightly. "She's not plain," he said, voice low and firm. "She's perfect." For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. Then Lorraine gave a clipped nod and walked away. But the damage was done. The whispers started as they moved through the hallways. "She's not one of us." "No family name?" "Is she wearing flats?" "Did you see that dress?" "Cream? At a wedding?" Olivia tried to keep her head high. Jackson kept close, guiding her through the house like a knight shielding his queen from arrows. Still, every glance felt like a dagger. Every smile was a test. During dinner, Olivia sat beside Jackson at the long family table, surrounded by crystal glasses and candlelight. She sipped water carefully, watching every gesture. But she noticed things others missed. The child across the table dropping his fork. Olivia leaned over and handed him hers without hesitation, the elderly maid struggling with a tray. Olivia rose and helped her, gently and without being asked. The awkward silence as conversation faltered. Olivia smiled and asked Jackson's youngest cousin about her artwork, bringing laughter back to the table. She didn't belong in their world, but she brought something it had been missing. Kindness. A few people noticed. Jackson did. He couldn't stop watching her. How she folded her napkin after the meal, how she glanced at him like she was checking to make sure he was okay. At one point, he reached for her hand under the table. She didn't flinch. Instead, she laced her fingers with his. A small, soft touch. But it sent thunder through his chest. He didn't know what was happening. This was supposed to be an act, a temporary fix, a mask. But Olivia didn't feel like a mask. She felt like the only real thing in the room. Later that evening, as they retreated to the guest suite assigned to them, Olivia slipped off her shoes and sat on the edge of the bed. "I don't think your family likes me," she said quietly. Jackson removed his tie and knelt in front of her. "That's because they don't know you." She looked into his eyes. "Do you?" He hesitated. Then, "I'm starting to." Her gaze softened. "This was just supposed to be a favor, remember?" "I remember." His voice was low, gravelly. "But every time I see you, I forget." Outside the window, the sky turned from twilight to ink. But inside that room, something delicate began to glow. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was close. And Olivia could feel the fire starting. She had walked into this house a stranger. But now something told her she wouldn't leave it the same. The moon hung low, casting silver shadows across the vast Wilson estate garden. It was the kind of night that whispered secrets, cool air brushing against leaves, stars scattered like spilled diamonds across the sky. Olivia stepped quietly onto the stone path, barefoot in her soft cream dress. The mansion behind her buzzed with polished conversations and clinking glasses. But out here, it was just silence. And him. She spotted Jackson near the edge of the garden wall, leaning against a marble pillar. One hand held a half-empty glass of scotch. The other hung loosely by his side. His tie was gone, shirt slightly wrinkled. His usual armor was cracked. He didn't see her at first. Or maybe he did, but didn't know how to speak. She finally said gently, "They don't like me." Jackson turned his head slightly, the glass catching a sliver of moonlight. "I don't care," he said without hesitation, his voice rough like sandpaper. "Let them choke on their pride." His words were meant to comfort, but Olivia could still feel the invisible bruises left by those silent glares at dinner, the forced smiles, the whispered judgments behind crystal glasses and silk napkins. "But why me?" she asked. "You could have hired a dozen women prettier than me, richer, more acceptable." Jackson turned fully to her now, his face unreadable in the moonlight. "You want the truth?" Olivia nodded. He took a deep breath, setting the glass down on the edge of a marble bench. Then slowly, he stepped closer, the space between them shrinking to inches. "Because you don't pretend," he said, his eyes searching hers. "You didn't know who I was when I walked into that bookstore. You smiled at a child. You helped an old man find his cane. You shelved books like you were arranging treasure." His voice softened. "You're not fake. You don't wear masks. And I needed something real, even if it was just for 3 days." Olivia felt her breath catch. She hadn't expected that. Not from a man who looked like he walked out of a magazine cover. Not from a billionaire who probably had more passwords than emotions. "I didn't think I'd like you," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Jackson tilted his head. "And now?" She looked up at him, her cheeks flushing pink. "Now I don't know what to think." Just then, footsteps echoed behind them, deliberate, slow. A tall man emerged from the shadows between the hedges, his hands in his blazer pockets, a mocking smile painted across his face. Edward Wilson, Jackson's cousin. He was everything Jackson wasn't, smug, sharp-tongued, and always hungry for gossip. "Well, well," Edward drawled. "So this is your new toy?" Jackson immediately stiffened. Olivia took a step back, surprised by the venom in Edward's voice. Edward glanced at Olivia, then back at Jackson. "I give it a week before she runs, unless you pay her double." "Don't," Jackson warned, voice icy. But Edward smirked, undeterred. "Come on, cousin. Let's not play pretend. She's not one of us. You think this little bookstore charity case will survive Sunday brunch with the board?" Olivia stood frozen. Every word was like a pin pressed into her skin. Edward turned to her now, as if she were an exhibit. "Tell me, Olivia, do you even know which fork to use during a 7-course meal?" "That's enough," Jackson said, stepping forward. Edward kept going. "She doesn't belong here. She's not like us. This whole charade is pathetic." Then Jackson's voice changed. It dropped to something low, steady, dangerous. "Then maybe," he said slowly, "it's this family that doesn't belong in my life." Edward blinked. "What did you just say?" Jackson moved between Olivia and Edward. "You heard me. I built my own world. Without your money, your rules, or your plastic smiles. If choosing someone real over someone refined makes me an outcast, then I'll gladly take the door." Edward scoffed. "You're insane." "No," Jackson said calmly. "I'm just done." Silence stretched between them. Edward shook his head and walked off, muttering something about losing his mind over a girl with library dust on her sleeves. When he was gone, Olivia looked at Jackson. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "I did," he said, turning to face her again, "because they don't see you, not like I do." He reached for her hand, and this time, she let him take it without hesitation. "You deserve more than polite cruelty," he continued. "You deserve a world where you don't have to prove your worth every second." Olivia swallowed hard. "You're not what I expected," she said softly. "And you're everything I never knew I needed," he replied. For a long moment they stood there, hand in hand beneath the moonlight, surrounded by roses and whispers of wind. And without saying a word, both of them realized something had changed. This wasn't a performance anymore. This wasn't just pretending, it was real. It was terrifying. And it was beautiful. The night air was still, wrapped in a heavy silence that pressed softly on the windows of the Wilson estate. Every guest had gone to their rooms, and the mansion had quieted into a slumbering hush. But sleep refused to visit two hearts beating louder than the silence itself. Jackson lay on his side in the guest suite, staring at the ceiling. The sheets were cool, the lights dimmed, but his mind raced like thunder. Every word Olivia had said in the garden echoed inside him. Every look she'd given him burned behind his eyes. This wasn't what he'd expected. Not this emotion, not this ache. He sat up, running a hand through his dark hair. A glass of scotch sat untouched on the nightstand. For once, he didn't want the comfort of old habits. Meanwhile, in the adjacent room, Olivia sat curled on the edge of her bed, hugging her knees to her chest. She had changed into a simple satin robe, her hair tumbling freely over her shoulders. But she wasn't at peace. Her heart wouldn't let her sleep. Everything felt upside down. Jackson was supposed to be just a job, just a temporary script she agreed to perform for 3 days. But his words in the garden, his defense, his touch, they weren't fake, and neither were her feelings anymore. Unable to breathe inside 4 walls, she rose quietly and stepped into the hallway, her bare feet making no sound on the plush carpet. She didn't expect to find him already on the balcony, but he was there, standing alone in the moonlight, the night wind tugging gently at his shirt, his eyes gazing upward like he was trying to find answers among the stars. He turned when he heard her. His expression softened. He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. Olivia stepped beside him, her voice barely above a whisper. "You can't sleep either?" Jackson shook his head. "My mind won't shut off." They stood together in silence, their shoulders brushing. The sky above was vast, speckled with stars, as if heaven had cracked open and spilled diamonds. After a moment, Jackson spoke, his voice low and hoarse. "I should have told you sooner." She looked at him, heart suddenly pounding. "Told me what?" He turned, facing her fully now, and when he looked into her eyes, there were no walls left, no sarcasm, no distance, no shield of wealth or pride. "This wasn't just a plan," he said slowly. "Not anymore. Not after watching you laugh with my cousin's child, or help the maid, or tell off Edward with just your silence." He took a deep breath, his voice cracking slightly. This became something else. Her breath caught. "What are you saying?" Jackson stepped closer, every inch trembling with honesty. "I want you, Olivia. Not for 3 days. Not for a weekend show." He paused. "I want you. For forever." The words fell into the night like rain after a long drought. Soft, cleansing, unexpected. Olivia didn't speak, not because she didn't believe him, but because her heart already had. She took a single step forward. Jackson reached up slowly, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered, tracing the curve of her jaw as if memorizing her. Then he kissed her, softly, slowly, as if afraid to break something so fragile and beautiful. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't staged. It was real, honest, timeless. The kiss deepened with emotion. Neither of them trying to impress, neither pretending. Just 2 souls learning the shape of love in a language no one had ever taught them. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. "I don't know when this happened," he whispered. She smiled softly. "Maybe in the bookstore," he chuckled. "Or maybe when you called me out for being emotionally bankrupt." Her smile grew. "That sounds like me." Jackson's voice turned serious again. "I was numb before you, surrounded by wealth but starving inside. You made me feel again." Tears welled in her eyes. "And you made me believe someone like me could be more than enough." They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, the world outside forgotten. The act was over. The mask had fallen. The lie that brought them together had birthed a truth neither expected. From opposite worlds, they had built a bridge with nothing but kindness, courage, and honesty. And on that balcony, under a blanket of stars, Jackson and Olivia kissed like they were writing their first chapter. Not of a contract, but of a real love story. A love that didn't care about last names, wealth, or social rules. Just hearts, beating as one. The golden morning of the wedding rose over the Wilson estate with a strange mix of beauty and tension. The halls buzzed with servants and stylists, music drifted from the grand ballroom, and flowers perfumed the air with soft whispers of roses and lilies. It was a day meant for joy, but a storm had already begun to stir, not outside but within the hearts of those watching. Jackson stood beside Olivia at the top of the sweeping staircase. His hand gripped hers tightly, not as part of the act anymore, but because he needed her there, like lungs need air. He was done pretending. They descended the stairs and every head turned. The grand room below was filled with expensive suits and judgmental stares, a sea of well-dressed whispers. Champagne glasses froze midair. Smiles turned stiff. Curious glances turned cold. Jackson didn't flinch. Olivia walked with him gracefully, but her heart pounded beneath her dress. She could feel the weight of every gaze, the question behind every look. Who does she think she is? The family had tolerated her presence so far because they believed she was temporary, just a showpiece, a weekend illusion to quiet rumors. But this moment was about to crush those illusions. Jackson stopped in front of everyone. He cleared his throat. The chatter died instantly. "I need to say something before this day continues," he said, his voice firm, but calm. Everyone turned, eyes narrowing. Jackson turned toward Olivia, his hand never leaving hers. "This woman standing beside me, she is not my fake wife," gasps echoed. A few champagne glasses clinked back onto trays. Olivia's breath caught. "She is not a performance, not a hired actress, not a temporary distraction," Jackson continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "She's the woman I've fallen for." A heavy silence fell, as thick as stone. Then it began, the murmurs, the uncomfortable shifting, the shocked glances passing like wind through a wheat field. And then one voice broke through. His father, powerful, respected, cold. He stood slowly from his polished chair near the fireplace, his gaze sharp like steel. "She's not like us, Jackson," he said sternly. "She's not from our world. She didn't grow up in it. She won't understand it." Jackson turned to face him, still holding Olivia's hand. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Exactly," Jackson said, his tone unwavering. "She's not from our world, and that's why I love her." His father narrowed his eyes. Jackson continued, "Because our world, this rich, hollow, perfect on the outside world, is broken, full of pride, cold, empty." He looked at Olivia again, his voice softening. "And she's the only thing that makes sense in it. She's warmth in this icy place. She's kindness in a room full of cruelty." Olivia's eyes filled with tears, but she held them back. She wouldn't cry. Not here, not now. No one spoke. Even the band in the corner stopped their warm-up. Then slowly, quietly, Jackson's younger brother, the groom himself, stepped forward. Everyone watched him, unsure of which side he would choose. He walked past his parents, past the shocked cousins, past the glaring aunts, and stopped right in front of Olivia. He looked at her for a long moment, then smiled and hugged her. "Welcome to the family," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. A gasp, then another, then silence, and finally something cracked in the room. The first aunt looked away and sighed. A cousin offered Olivia a soft smile. A family friend whispered, "Maybe he's right." The ice began to thaw. Not all at once, but it was the beginning. Jackson exhaled slowly, still holding Olivia's hand. "You didn't have to defend me like that," she whispered. "Yes, I did," he replied, "because I'm not afraid of them anymore." Her eyes softened. "Not even your father?" "I'm only afraid of losing what's real, and you're the only real thing I've ever had." She reached up, touching his cheek gently. "Then hold on to me." And he did. As the ceremony began and guests started filing out to the garden, the storm of judgment gave way to scattered rays of understanding. Not everyone accepted her, but someone did. And the wall had cracked. Their love wasn't about status. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about matching bloodlines or bank accounts. It was about truth. And in a world built on illusions, truth was the rarest and most powerful thing of all. The breeze that moved through the Wilson estate was no longer cold. It was spring now, months after the wedding, after the truth had shattered expectations and softened even the hardest hearts. The mansion stood the same, tall, elegant, untouched. But something in the air had changed. Peace had settled, and with it, love bloomed. Jackson Wilson walked beside Olivia, their hands gently linked, fingers interlaced like roots of an old strong tree. His touch wasn't for show anymore. It wasn't part of a performance or a contract. It was real. They had gone through fire, and somehow what survived was stronger than before. He looked at her now, not with curiosity or calculation, but with complete adoration. The kind of gaze that asked nothing and gave everything. They paused under a magnolia tree, where pink petals drifted to the ground like soft rain. Olivia leaned against his shoulder and sighed. "I used to be invisible," she whispered. "Now it feels like I'm seen." "You were always worthy of being seen," Jackson replied, kissing her forehead gently. They just needed time to open their eyes. Laughter rang from the garden behind them. Olivia turned and smiled. His mother, once the coldest of all, was walking toward her with a soft bouquet of lilacs and daisies in hand. Her steps were careful, but her eyes were warm. "I thought these would look lovely in the chapel," she said. "What do you think, dear?" Olivia blinked, touched by the simple word, dear. "I love them," she said, her voice full of gratitude. Jackson's mother hesitated, then gently tucked a flower behind Olivia's ear. "You've brought something into this family we didn't know we needed." Olivia smiled, heart swelling. "I only brought myself." "And that," the woman said softly, "was more than enough." As they walked toward the garden together, a chorus of little feet came rushing around the hedges. Jackson's younger cousins, all giggles and excitement. "Olivia! Olivia! Tell us another story. Are you really going to live here forever? Can I be in your wedding?" She knelt in the grass, laughing, as they wrapped around her like vines around sunlight. "Slow down," she said, eyes bright. "One at a time." She shared stories, ones about books, about love, about being kind when no one's watching. And for the first time in Wilson estate history, joy wasn't guarded behind gates and pride. It danced freely in the open air. Even Edward, once bitter, cruel, and dripping with prejudice, walked by and gave her a silent nod of respect. No sarcasm, no scorn, just a quiet surrender. He had lost the battle. Love had won. Later that afternoon, Olivia stood before the mirror in the master bedroom, her fingers brushing over the silk fabric of her engagement dress. Pale ivory, soft lace, simple, pure. Jackson came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. He looked at her reflection, not with hunger, but awe. "You're breathtaking," he murmured. She smiled. "Even in something plain?" "Especially in something plain," he said, "because nothing about you ever needed glitter to shine." She turned to him, her voice trembling. "Sometimes I still wonder, why me?" Jackson touched her cheek. "Because you didn't care about who I was on paper. You saw the man behind the billionaire, the broken one, the guarded one, and you stayed." Her eyes welled. "And you believed in me when no one else did." He kissed her softly, their lips meeting in a promise that words could never keep. Not even vows could match what they had already proven. Outside, chairs were being set up for the upcoming ceremony. Not the fake one, not a transaction, but the real one. This time, there would be no judgment. This time, love was the only guest that mattered. As the sun dipped below the hills, casting golden light across the estate, Jackson and Olivia stepped out onto the balcony. Below them, family gathered, not as critics, but as witnesses. Witnesses to change, to acceptance, to a lesson learned in the quietest way possible, not through lectures or arguments or breaking the world apart, but through choosing love again and again, even when the world whispered, "She's not one of us." Because now they knew. She was the best of them. In a world where people are judged by bloodlines, bank accounts, or skin tones, this story is a reminder that love doesn't check pedigrees. It checks the heart. And when the heart is pure, the rest of the world has no choice but to follow.